If you enjoy our deep dives, don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's dig into the situation with Europe's new peace plan for Ukraine. Recent events kind of suggest a shift in U.S. foreign policy, and Europe's having to take the lead. One really interesting thing is this proposed U.S.-Ukraine minerals deal that former President Trump put on the table. It gives the U.S. access to valuable resources in eastern Ukraine, but without any security guarantees for Ukraine. And this really raises questions about the U.S.'s real goals here. It's left Europe feeling uneasy about depending on the U.S. It's fascinating how this didn't just happen overnight. There were a few moves by Trump that kind of signaled this change in U.S. policy. He publicly questioned whether the U.S. should defend Ukraine, had that phone call with Putin he called productive, and even got into peace talks with Russia and Saudi Arabia. And get this, both Ukraine and Europe were excluded from those talks. And to add all that, Trump's defense secretary at the time actually suggested that Ukraine should think about giving up territory to Russia. It really seemed like they were on the same page as Putin. Now, this minerals deal is where things get really interesting. We're talking about billions of dollars worth of mineral resources, oil and gas in eastern Ukraine. Trump's argument was that the money from these resources would basically pay back all the aid the U.S. had given to Ukraine, although he always kind of inflated the actual numbers for that aid. So Ukrainian President Zelensky was supposed to meet with Trump to officially sign this deal. Before that meeting, French President Macron and then UK Prime Minister Starmer met with Trump, urging him to stay united against Russia. But the meeting between Zelensky and Trump, it didn't go so well. Instead of a productive conversation, it turned into a public argument. Trump accused Zelensky of not being grateful enough for U.S. support and even said that Ukraine was risking World War III. Zelensky left without signing anything. So the relationship between the U.S. and Ukraine was left very shaky. And then to make things worse, Trump suspended U.S. military aid to Ukraine, which basically forced Europe to speed up its own peace plan. Starmer, because of all this, decided to host a summit in London and brought together 18 world leaders, mainly from Europe, but also Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Turkey's foreign minister. This summit led to a four-point European peace plan for Ukraine. It calls for continued military support to Ukraine and more pressure on Russia. It really emphasizes that Ukraine has to be involved in any peace talks. It also stresses how important it is to make Ukraine's defenses stronger to prevent Russia from, attacking again. And finally, maybe the most interesting part, the plan suggests creating a coalition of the willing. This coalition would protect any peace agreement and guarantee Ukraine's safety in the future. However, the details of this coalition are still pretty unclear. It's expected to be led by France and the UK and probably include the Baltic states, Finland, and Canada. But whether other countries will join is uncertain. Poland and Spain have said they won't send troops to Ukraine. Germany's position is also a bit ambiguous. Under former Chancellor Olaf Scholz, Germany was hesitant. But the new chancellor at the time, Friedrich Merz, was known for being more aggressive. He even suggested a new European defense alliance, maybe even replacing NATO. This change in German leadership really added another layer of complexity to how European security was developing. So one of the biggest challenges for Europe's peace plan is the money. Filling the gap left by the U.S. in terms of military and financial aid to Ukraine, it's going to be expensive for all European countries, even the ones that aren't directly involved in the coalition of the willing. Meeting the goal of increasing defense spending to 3% or even 4% of GDP, that's a big financial burden. While individual countries are trying to figure out how to handle these costs, there are discussions at the continental level too. Germany, for example, is considering, changing its constitution to relax its strict fiscal rules. They call it the debt brake. The debt brake basically limits how much the government can borrow. Loosening it would allow for more government spending on defense, which is a big shift from Germany's usually cautious fiscal policies. At the EU level, there were two main initiatives being considered. The first was about seizing the 200 billion euros in frozen assets from the Russian central bank. This proposal had support from France, Germany, the UK, and other countries. The idea was to use this money to fund Ukraine's reconstruction. French officials even suggested that Europe could seize these assets if Russia broke a ceasefire agreement in the future. The second initiative announced by the EU was the Rearm Europe initiative. This was a big plan to borrow 150 billion euros at the EU level, which member states could then use to finance increased defense spending. But this proposal also raised concerns about adding to the EU's existing debt, which was already around 300 billion euros from borrowing to support member states during the pandemic. Critics argued that taking on more debt without a clear plan to pay it back could make the EU's financial problems even worse. These discussions about paying for the peace plan really highlight the tough decisions European leaders are facing. On the one hand, they know they need to give substantial support to Ukraine and stop Russia from attacking again. But on the other hand, they have to deal with the economic realities and the potential risks of, really increasing defense spending and taking on more debt. And the situation is made even more urgent by the fact that the EU is under pressure to finalize its military support plan for Ukraine, and quickly. With U.S. aid on hold, there were worries that, a long pause in American support could give Russia an advantage militarily. While all this was going on, the Kremlin really ramped up its rhetoric, accusing the West of trying to weaken Russia. Putin spokesman Dmitry Peskov even said that the fragmentation of the collective West has begun. Russia also totally rejected the idea of European peacekeeping troops being part of any future peace agreement, arguing that Europe's ongoing military aid to Ukraine showed that they weren't really committed to peace. Now, let's talk about the U.S.-Ukraine relationship, which in all of this is still a bit of a question mark. So Zelensky still said he was interested in Trump's mineral deal, recognizing that it could, have economic benefits for Ukraine. However, he also knew it was important to fix things with the U.S. to get that vital American military aid back. This put Zelensky in a, tricky spot. To repair things with the Trump administration, he might have to apologize for what Trump saw as disrespect. But Zelensky also wants the U.S. to officially say that Russia's the aggressor in this conflict. And that could actually, strain relations with the U.S. even more and make negotiations much more complicated. And, adding to all this is that the U.S. is still a really important defense partner for Europe as a whole. So Zelensky has to be really careful, maybe even putting aside any personal issues to get long-term support from both the U.S. and Europe. Europe's peace plan really depends on a few things. Can European leaders get past their disagreements and actually work together? Will they be able to get the money they need to help Ukraine defend itself and stop Russia from, attacking again? And maybe the most important question is, can Europe stay united against Russia's pressure and attempts to, exploit any weaknesses? The answers to these questions are going to shape not just the future of Ukraine, but also the future of Europe and its relationship with the U.S. As things keep developing, we'll have to see if Europe can actually handle these complicated challenges and find a new way towards peace and stability in the region. If you're enjoying our deep dives, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more.